Hi class, today in this video we'll be using our confidence interval to find E, or the margin of error, and P hat, the point estimate. So the confidence interval 0.537 is less than P is less than 0.563 is obtained for a population proportion P. Use the confidence interval limits to find the margin of error E and the point estimate P hat. Alright, so remember in the beginning of this chapter, before you really got into it, I introduced you to a handy formula chart, or sometimes I'll call it a cheat sheet. So I'm going to bring that up here to see if we can find those formulas for E and P hat. So I have my table up here, and the leftmost column is the parameter column, and that's where I'm going to find P, because since we're in 7.1, the parameter we're working with is a proportion. So I find P, and in that row is where I'm going to find my formulas for P hat and E. Okay, so I'm going to look to the right, and the first formula that I need is the point estimate, or P hat. So the P hat, remember we talked about this as being our sample proportion, which we use to estimate as our point estimate a population proportion. And in this entry here on my table, I notice that I have 3 cases for P hat. Your problem is either going to give you a sample size, which we'll call N, and a portion of that sample which has a certain characteristic, and we'll call that X. In that case, your sample proportion, P hat, will be X over N. Sometimes your problem will just go ahead and give you P hat as a percentage. In that case, you don't really have to do anything but convert that to a decimal. However, we're not given either of these in our problem, so I need the third one by default, which says that P hat is the upper plus lower divided by 2. And what that upper and lower refers to are the upper confidence limit and the lower confidence limit for my confidence interval. What this formula suggests is that I'm finding the very middle of that confidence interval. I'm taking the smallest number plus the biggest number, and I'm dividing it by 2. So this tells me that P hat should lie in the middle of my confidence interval. All right? So now I'm going to look and see if I can find the formula for margin of error, and it's a little further to the right on my table. And the margin of error, it says find the confidence interval, and then E is upper minus lower divided by 2. So in this case, I am finding the spread of my confidence interval, and I'm taking half of that. Okay? I'm taking the difference of the bigger number and the smaller number of my interval, and I'm dividing that by 2. So let's go ahead and minimize that and record those 2 formulas so that we can use them to obtain the answers to our problems. So it asks for E first, so we're going to record that first. So E was the upper confidence limit minus the lower and divided by 2. Now, something that we consistently talk about in this class is the fact that since I have a fraction and my numerator has 2 terms here, I'm going to put in my calculator parentheses around that upper minus lower before I divide by 2. All right, and then P hat was parentheses upper plus lower, and then close my parentheses and divide by 2. So going back to E, my upper limit is 0.563, my lower limit is 0.537, and remember, so I have 0.563 minus 0.537 in parentheses, and then I divide that by 2, and when I put that in the calculator, I get 0.013. Okay, so my margin of error is 0.013. So now back to finding P hat. Again, my upper confidence limit is 0.563, and then I add to the lower confidence limit of 0.537, and I divide by 2. So that should then look like parentheses 0.563 plus 0.537, close parentheses, divide by 2, and the calculator tells me that that is 0.55. And notice that 0.55 does lie directly in between 0.537 and 0.563. All right, and so you should be good to go for that problem.